What is glaucoma? Glaucoma is a group of disorders. Basically, it is a progressive optic neuropathy. The optic nerve is involved, and the changes here are progressive. So it is called as progressive optic neuropathy, wherein you see disc changes. So the optic disc changes are there, and associated visual field changes are there. Here, see the raised IOP is a major risk factor. It does not come in the definition of glaucoma. It is only a major risk factor. So those who are having a raised IOP, there is a high likelihood of developing glaucoma. So glaucoma means a progressive optic neuropathy. So that will correspond to disc changes and visual field changes. So this is a triangle where IOP is a risk factor, and the main changes you're seeing are disc changes and visual field defects. So just revising the basic parts of the eye, you can see the different parts of the eye. Ma'am, pointer or mouse will be there? Only with the hand. Okay. Right. So whenever there is an increased intraocular pressure, whatever aqueous is produced in the posterior chamber, it has to drain from the anterior chamber through the angle. So at the angle, if because of increased intraocular pressure, there will be more accumulation. All this pressure translates to the optic nerve, which is present behind the eye. So what is the pathogenesis? The main pathogenesis of glaucoma is, first thing is a mechanical therapy. Mechanical theory, as we have discussed, intraocular pressure related damage is the main cause. So whenever there is a raised IOP, there will be mechanical stretching of lamina cribrosa. This part is there within the optic nerve and within the sheath of the optic nerve. So here, because of raised IOP, there is a mechanical stretching of the lamina cribrosa. The axoplasmic, whenever there is a stretching, whatever axoplasmic flow should come to the retinal ganglion cells will be obstructed. Because of this, the nutrition will be hampered and there will be the death of retinal ganglion cells. As you all know, the retinal ganglion cells are the ones which comprise the optic nerve. So this will ultimately lead to glaucomatous optic neuropathy. Now, this is just a diagram showing you what will happen. This is in the case of a normal eye. So in the posterior chamber, the aqueous is produced through the pupillary area. It comes into the anterior chamber, and through the angle, it is drained outside. So whenever there is a blockage here or the fluid gets accumulated, there is a buildup of pressure. So the fluid can be blocked because of the anatomy of the angle itself, or because of different factors in the angle which can hinder the flow of the aqueous. So all this increased pressure will damage the blood vessels and the optic nerve. So all this optic nerve which is present here in this part of the retina gets compressed, leading to optic neuropathy. Now that is one theory, that is a mechanical theory. We have another theory called as vascular theory. That says increased intraocular pressure. Here, along with an increased intraocular pressure, there will be a decrease in blood supply to the optic nerve head. So when there is a decreased blood supply, this will reduce the perfusion pressure to the optic nerve head. This leads to ischemia and death of the retinal ganglion cells. Ultimately, the retinal ganglion cells are the ones that suffer, leading to glaucomatous optic neuropathy. Now, there is another theory called as biochemical theory. In this, biochemicals or the toxins are released. Increased levels of neurotoxins have been found in patients with glaucoma. These neurotoxins are like glutamate and nitric acid. This will cause increased apoptosis of the retinal ganglion cells. So whenever the retinal ganglion cells are affected, there will be glaucomatous optic neuropathy. Now, the classification of glaucoma. It can be divided into either a congenital glaucoma, depending on the age, or an adult glaucoma. So the congenital or developmental glaucoma, these two are again different. Congenital glaucoma will develop right from birth, whereas developmental glaucoma will start anywhere from the teenage years and will go on till the next decades. Then you have the adult glaucomas. Adult glaucomas are classified based on the mechanism of glaucoma. It could be the angle anatomy. It could be an open angle or an angle closure. So it can be a primary open angle glaucoma or primary angle closure glaucoma. Sometimes both mechanisms will act, then you call it as primary mixed mechanism glaucoma. Apart from this, if there is any particular reason that is causing glaucoma, then we call it as secondary glaucoma. So we'll deal with this later on. So again, for your reminding you, the site of production of aqueous is here, the ciliary body. and this is coming forward through the pupillary area into the anterior chamber and going through the angle. This is the trabecular outflow pattern. 90% of the aqueous goes through the trabecular outflow. Here you are seeing another pathway. This is the uveoscleral outflow. 10% of the aqueous goes through the uveoscleral outflow. So the angle anatomy is one which shows us what type of glaucoma it is. This is a picture showing the picturization of the angle. This is the cornea and this is the iris. The place where both meet is the angle. So if a person is standing here and visualizing the angle, when you cannot see any angle structures, that is where the cornea and the iris merge, there are no angle structures visible, then you call it as closed angle. But as you are traveling here, in few people, a significant gap is there. That is, in most of our population, a significant gap is there between the cornea and the iris, and you see the angle structure. This is called as an open angle. So this part of the eye is having a closed angle. No patient can have two mechanisms this way. This is just for your explanation that the angle can either be closed like this, or it can have few structures visible like this, or it can be a total open angle. So what are the angle structures visible? In chronological order, these are the structures visible. The first thing that you see will be Schwalbe's line. Schwalbe's line is the first thing. This is the posterior continuation of the cornea. Wherever the cornea ends, it continues here as a Schwalbe's line. So that part of the angle will show you that is the first thing that you visualize in the angle, even if it is a narrow angle. Then you can see the trabecular meshwork. Here the dotted pigmented line is a trabecular meshwork. Beyond that, you're seeing the white gap here. This white area is called as a scleral spur. Scleral spur is nothing but the area wherein the sclera shelves into the cornea and iris at the level of the angle. That part of the area is called as scleral spur. And this is the main area, that is the ciliary body. So the ciliary body band is visible only if the angle is totally open. Otherwise, the least structure you will be able to see is the Schwalbe's line. So the method of examination of the anterior is gonioscopy. Gonioscopy, in this you have an instrument called as gonio lens. This lens will actually have 4 mirrors inside. That's why we call it as 4-mirror gonioscopy examination. So using these mirrors, 4 mirrors are installed within the gonioscopy lens. So when you're placing the lens on the eye of the patient, you have to visualize 4 angles separately. First, you look at the superior angle, then go to the nasal, temporal, and then inferior angles. This is how you visualize. You cannot see all the angles at a time. So you have to visualize 4 quadrants using the 4-mirror gonioscopy method. Another picture showing you the anatomy of the angle. So this between the cornea and the iris are all these angle structures situated. Starting from the beginning, Schwalbe's line, trabecular meshwork, scleral spur, and ciliary body band. This is how you will see. In case of a narrow angle, only the Schwalbe's line will be visible. As the angle opens, you can see the trabecular meshwork and the scleral spur, and in the end, ciliary body band. So today we'll deal with primary open angle glaucoma. So as you all know, open angle glaucoma is when the angle structures are very clearly visible. So this will occur in eyes with open angles. As is the definition of glaucoma, in case of glaucoma, there will be disc changes and nerve fiber layer changes. So whenever you're seeing the disc changes, there will be associated field changes. Visual field, we'll deal with the visual field as we go through the class. Now, raised IOP, as I said, is a risk factor. It can be present in 50% of the cases. Not all cases of glaucoma will have a raised IOP. So the risk factors. IOP is the most important risk factor. Normal range of intraocular pressure is between 11 to 21 mm. This is only a statistical consideration. 5% of the people can have anything less than 11, and 5% of normal people can have anything more than 21. So raised IOP is present on only 50% of the primary open angle glaucoma patients. Now, so the pressure dependent glaucoma is whenever the raised IOP is causing the disc changes and field changes, where you call it as pressure dependent glaucoma. Now, sometimes what is happening is there is a normal tension glaucoma. That is, the intraocular pressure is normal, but still you are seeing the disc changes and field changes. So when you see the characteristic changes of the disc and the visual fields, in presence of a normal IOP, then you call it as normal tension. The tension is normal, but definitely there is a glaucoma. That's why you call it as normal tension glaucoma. Now, ocular hypertension. Sometimes you see a raised IOP, but there are no characteristic features of glaucoma. That is, there are no disc changes, there are no field changes. Then you call it only as hypertension. That is ocular hypertension. So these are the entities that you need to differentiate from glaucoma. One is pressure-dependent glaucoma, that which we commonly see, because IOP is the most common risk factor. Now you have the normal tension glaucoma, where your pressures are normal, but glaucomatous changes are seen in the patient. Another entity is ocular hypertension, wherein the pressure is raised. No matter how much the pressure is raised, but there are no signs of glaucoma. But still, these patients have high tendency to go into glaucoma. That's why you have to follow up these patients as well. Now, the IOP is important to check for the disc changes and the visual field effects. Considering the other risk factors, heredity. Definitely, heredity is one of the risk factors. 4% of the offsprings will have a tendency of developing a glaucoma. 10% is seen in the siblings. Age. Age is a risk factor. All the cases of glaucoma increase with age. Usually at about 50 years of age, you see a graph which shows an increase in the incidence of glaucoma. Race, more common in the black races. Central corneal thickness. What is central corneal thickness? When you measure the corneal thickness, normal corneal thickness will be around 520 to 540 microns in the center. So we have an instrument called as pachymetry. It will measure the central corneal thickness. So whenever there is an increased, when your examination of the intraocular pressure is being done, you call it as the method is called as tonometry. In that, you will apply pressure on the central cornea. So the thickness of the cornea will decide how much IOP the reading is showing you. Supposing the corneal thickness is high in the center, then the IOP recording will be shown as deeply high, falsely high. Why high? Because the increased corneal thickness requires more pressure to dip it. So it shows a false high intraocular pressure readings. Whereas a decreased central corneal thickness will show you a false low IOP readings. So central corneal thickness measurement is one of the important measurements for glaucoma. Then myopia. Myopic people have a tendency of developing primary open angle glaucoma more than the general population. Whereas hypermetropes, they'll have a shallow AC, they have more tendencies of developing angle closure glaucoma. So myopes, primary open angle glaucoma is more common. Now systemic diseases. Diabetes. Here the microvascular perfusion is decreased. So whenever the perfusion to the optic nerve head is decreased, there is more chances of ischemia, and as we have seen in the perfusion theory, there is more chances of developing glaucoma. Hypertension. Hypertension aggressive, and it's not the hypertension which is causing glaucoma, but when the patient is on aggressive anti-hypertension therapy, so that itself can lead to decreased perfusion of the optic nerve head. So that can be one reason for glaucoma. So hypotension, mainly it is the hypotension which is causing glaucoma, and any medications for hypertension which aggressively decrease the hypertension will cause glaucoma. Then any perfusion problems like peripheral vascular disease or vasospasm or migraine, these can cause glaucoma. Again, these are the risk factors. You have other risk factors like cigarette smoking, alcohol. So now wherever you see, glaucoma is defined as a silent thief of sight. Why is it called a silent thief of sight? Because normally if you have any symptom, you will approach the doctor, isn't it? Whenever there is a foreign body that is falling in the eye, that causes a lot of discomfort, and that can be seen clearly. So the patient will come to you that he is having some foreign body. In glaucoma, what happens is the peripheral fields are affected. Normally, when you are seeing when you're seeing someone straight, apart from your straight vision, you will have some visions on the sides of the axis. So that will be affected in case of glaucoma. That is why the patient never realizes that he's losing his peripheral field of vision as long as the central field is intact. That is why they'll approach to you in the late stages. That is why we insist on diagnosing glaucoma at the earliest stages. This is possible only by clinical examination. The patient himself cannot have the symptoms of glaucoma. There are very few vague clinical features that you see in a case of glaucoma. These are very insidious and slowly progressive. It can be in the form of mild headache or just a pain in the eye, that is eye ache. Sometimes patients who are very cautious, they can detect a defect in visual field. Supposing they are drivers, they'll be able to tell you that while driving, they're not able to see the divider, or they're hitting the divider or some other changes. So that can be picked up only by people who are involved in such professions. There is another thing is there is a frequent change of presbyopic glasses. No matter how much you give the presbyopia correction, the patient will not be happy. And sometimes there is a delay in dark adaptation. When you are going into a room for, it takes some time for dark adaptation. Whereas in the patients of glaucoma, it takes a little longer time. So that is one vague symptom. And reduced vision can be seen only in the late stages. So that is the reason why the patients come to you with glaucoma as only when they have a lot of damage to the optic nerve. And these are irreversible changes. Once the damage to the optic nerve has happened, it does not regenerate. So whatever damage is done, it is already done. So you have to just protect whatever the optic nerve fibers are just left. So that is why it is called a silent thief of sight, because of these vague symptoms. That is headache, defect in visual field, frequent change of presbyopic glasses, and delayed dark adaptation. Signs are, you will see mainly intraocular pressure changes. That is more common. You can also see the characteristic disc changes, nerve fiber layer changes, visual field defects, and on gonioscopy, when you examine in a case of primary open angle glaucoma, you will be seeing open angles. So we'll see what are these changes. IOP we have already discussed. IOP anything more than 21 is a risk factor. Few people, in spite of having a normal IOP, when they have glaucomatous changes, that you call it as normal tension glaucoma. Sometimes raised IOP without glaucoma, that you call it as ocular hypertension. Now we'll see what are these disc changes. Okay, other signs, when you examine the patient's anterior segment, it will be normal. Only when the optic nerve damage has occurred to such an extent that the pupillary reflex is becoming affected or it becomes sluggish, at that time you can see a change in the anterior segment. Otherwise, the anterior segment as it is might appear normal. So the intraocular pressure is raised in about 50% of the cases. In initial stages, IOP may not rise permanently, whereas in primary open angle glaucoma, there is a change in diurnal variation. We have one mechanism called as diurnal variation. Our IOP is not normal throughout the day. In most of the patients, you see a morning rise in 20% of the cases. In afternoon rise around at 1 o'clock, you see in few patients. Here morning rise will be seen somewhere around 8 o'clock in the morning. Afternoon rise will be seen around 1 o'clock in the morning. So biphasic rise is seen in 55% of the cases. So when you see a diurnal variation, when you're recording your IOP in the morning, it will be different. In the afternoon, it will be different. And in the evening, it will be different. So that variation will be less than 5 mm. For us, for any normal person, it should be less than 5 mm. So when the diurnal variation is more than 5 mm, it is a suspicious case of primary open angle glaucoma. But when the diurnal variation is definitely over 8 mm, it is a diagnostic feature of glaucoma. So any change in variation of the diurnal pressures more than 5 mm is very significant, and over 8 mm is diagnostic. Now, coming to the procedure of checking the intraocular pressure. As you all know, this is a slit lamp examination that is going on. Here you are checking the intraocular pressure via prism mounted on the applanation tonometer. This is called as applanation tonometer. So when you measure IOP, the instrument used is called as tonometer. There are two types or two methods of measuring the IOP. One is indentation tonometry, the other one is applanation tonometry. The one which is being done here is applanation tonometry. So this has a prism mounted on this. The applanation tonometer will have a prism. You can see a small circle. This circle here will be around 3 mm. This 3 mm will go and touch the central cornea of the patient. That's what we were discussing. When the central cornea is very thick, the measured IOP will come as high. Whereas when the central cornea is thinner, the measured IOP will come falsely low. So because this is the area, the central 3 mm is the area where the applanation tonometry is touching the patient. Now, what are the disc changes? Optic disc is the area which is formed by the nerve fiber layers. As you all know, the retina has 10 layers. From that, the nerve fiber layer is the 9th layer. All the nerve fiber layers, the nerves present in the nerve fiber layer, they will converge at the optic disc to form the optic nerve. In the optic disc, you have two parts. This is the entire round optic disc. In the center, you have a gap. The gap is called as the cup. Whereas the rest of the area of the optic disc, the thicker part of the optic disc is called as neuroretinal rim. So the gap is not containing any nerve fibers. It is only for transmission of the vessels. That is your central retinal artery and vein. So what is important for us is not the cup, but the neuroretinal rim, which is containing the nerve fibers. Supposing there is a loss in neuroretinal nerve fibers, so the rim becomes thinner and the optic cup increases. That is why you have a large cup in a case of glaucoma. That is because the nerve fiber layers which are present in the optic disc are getting damaged day by day. So optic cup is the empty space. So proportion of the cup, how much of the cup is relative to the disc, is helpful in evaluating a case of glaucoma. So in case of a normal person, this cup will occupy only 0.3 or 0.4 of the entire disc ratio. So we call it as 0.3 or 0.4 is the cup disc ratio. So physiological cupping will be anything less than 0.4:1. Whereas pathological cupping is the glaucoma changes start when you are seeing any cup disc ratio more than 0.4:1. This is where you have to think and start about the investigations of glaucoma. As you can see here, this is an optic disc which is normal. Here you can see the optic disc and this is the cup diameter which is 0.4. Now this is a case of glaucoma. Herein the disc size is the same, but the cup size has increased. The arrows you can see here, this arrow show you they are increased, whereas the cup here is occupying only 40% of the thickness. Here it is almost occupying the 70% of the optic disc. Then you call it as glaucomatous cupping. Now, optic disc changes. The other disc changes, what you can see is whenever there is a progressive thinning of the neuroretinal rim, as we have discussed before, there will be an increase in the optic cup. So, an increase in optic cup is seen. Thinning will be earliest seen at the superior pole and inferior pole. Rather than the temporal and nasal, we first see the changes here inferiorly or superiorly. When you're seeing a change here, wherein there is a dipping, you can see the neuroretinal rim is uniform here, till here. But here it is not coming as round. It is showing a dip here. This is called as an inferior notching. Here the nerve fiber layers are gone. So this part will show a defect here that we'll see later on. So the changes are seen most often in the superior pole and inferior pole. That's why you get a vertical elongation of cup. That is a characteristic feature of a glaucomatous cup. The elongation will be in a vertical direction. Later, the temporal and nasal fibers are also involved. So, briefly, the optic disc changes are anything wherein there is an asymmetry of the cup. That is, if you're comparing the right eye and the left eye, it should be uniform. If there is a variation of about 0.2, supposing the right eye disc is 0.3 and the left eye disc is 0.5, then it is a suspicious change in the left eye. So, asymmetry of the cup is one change. Any large CD ratio, cup disc ratio also called as CD ratio, if it is more than 0.4, then that is also significant. So, at these points, you'll get small hemorrhages at the disc. Those are called as splinter hemorrhages. We'll see what are these splinter hemorrhages. Correspondingly, wherever there is a loss of rim in that particular area, the nerve fiber layer shows a loss. These are called as nerve fiber layer defects. So when all these changes are happening, there will be the shifting of the vessels. The vessels in the sense, the central retinal artery and vein, which are supposed to arise from the center of the optic cup, will be shifting towards the nasal side. This is called as nasal shifting of the vessels. Because of that, you see a bionetting type of pattern. We'll see that again. And then you are able to see the lamellar dot sign. That is the optic nerve. In the base, it contains the lamina cribrosa, which is a sieve-like structure. If you're able to visualize that sieve-like structure with a dot-like pattern, then you call it as lamellar dot sign. Peripapillary atrophy. Around the area of the optic nerve, the area becomes atrophied. This is also one of the changes of optic disc. So what all is important is, one is the asymmetry of the cup, then a large CD ratio, small hemorrhages at the disc margins called as splinter hemorrhages, and defects in the nerve fiber layer, nasal shifting of the vessels, lamellar dot sign, and peripapillary atrophy. We'll see one of them. Now, as we have discussed, the changes are most often seen either in the superior or the inferior pole first. That's why you get a vertical elongation. You can see the cup is vertically over. It is no longer circular, but here it is vertically over. And here in this area, the fibers are absent, and this is called as superior notching. Here also you can see there is a vertical elongation of the cup with the superior and the inferior fibers being affected first. This is a case of advanced glaucoma. Normal CD ratio is 0.3:0.4. This can go as much as up to 0.8 or even 0.9 with a total loss of the nerve fiber layer. Even the complete rim can disappear in case of absolute glaucoma. So this is for comparison for the right eye and the left eye. You can see the right eye is having only 0.6 compared to the left eye, which is having more advanced glaucoma changes up to 0.8:1. Now, other features that we have discussed are pallor of the neuroretinal rim. So when you are seeing the glaucomatous changes, when the cup has enlarged, the space for the optic nerve of the for the central retinal artery and vein, which is there, that does not give much support to the central retinal artery and vein. So these vessels will be pushed towards the nasal side. This is called as nasalization of the vessels or the nasal pushing of the vessels. Now, when you see the vessels, normally they'll come from the center of the cup and arise straight outside. Now, because the vessels do not have a support, wherever there is a rim, there is a support. So they are coming towards the border of the cup. So when they're coming towards the border of the cup, they're actually going inside and then coming outside. This particular curve here, wherein they are dipping inside and coming towards the outside, is called as bionating sign. This is one characteristic feature of a glaucomatous disc. Other features are, here you can see small dot-like pattern. Here what you are seeing are the small circles with few gaps. These are the sieve-like structures which are seen in the lamina cribrosa. This is called as lamellar dot sign. This is another sign of a glaucomatous disc. Now we have discussed there are few hemorrhages in the disc in case of glaucoma. They are seen at the disc margins. Supposing the vessel is supposed to come here, as we have seen in the previous picture, when it is coming outside, there can be bionating. So at this point, it might get stretched a bit so that there is a hemorrhage here. That's why you're seeing the hemorrhages at the disc margin in particular. That's why you call these hemorrhages as splinter hemorrhages. Sometimes venous shunts are also developing because of the decreased perfusion of the optic nerve head. Venous shunts will also be seen. See, now this is a case of optic nerve atrophy in case of glaucoma, glaucomatous optic neuropathy. The surrounding the disc area will also show the loss of the fibers. So this is a peripapillary atrophy in case of glaucomatous disc. We were talking about field changes. As we have seen, whenever there is an area of nerve fiber loss, here the nerve fibers are lost. These nerve fibers are derived from this part of the retina. So this part of the retina, all the nerve fibers will submerge here. So if there is a damage to this part of the nerve fiber layer in the optic disc, so there will be a defect seen in this area of the retina, that we call it as wedge-shaped defect or the nerve fiber layer defect. We'll see that here. See, this part of the retina in a case the shape of a wedge here is the wedge-shaped defects or the nerve fiber layer defects. Very clearly you can see here between seeing arrow, this area, this total area is the wedge-shaped defect that you see in a case of nerve fiber layer. So these are called as nerve fiber layer changes. They are more clearly seen in a red-free light. Here you are seeing the black and white pictures, or you can use even a green light. This shows the nerve fiber layer changes very clearly. Now, what is visual field? Normally, as I told you, when you're seeing straight, that is, you're steadily fixing the eye, some part of the environment is also seen. So now you have a particular area of vision. The entire part which is behind your head, you're not able to see. So that area is a sea of darkness. In that you can see only an island of vision. What is there in front of you can see. So that we can calculate. Most of the area on the temporal side, as it is not covered by any bony structure on the temporal side, our field of vision on the temporal side is slightly higher. It is around 90 degrees. Whereas inferior side, it is 70 degrees, almost 70 degrees on the inferior side will be able to see. Superiorly, only 60 degrees will be seen because the orbital rim will come in between. So the 60 degrees above your eye level, you can see that is the superior field. And nasally, because of the presence of the nose, only 60 degrees can be seen in this direction. So this is your normal visual field. Here we are seeing the right eye. This is the fovea of the right eye. Fovea is the place where you see the best vision. And this is the optic nerve. So wherever the optic nerve is there, the optic nerve does not have any photoreceptors. For the light to be picked up, you need the photoreceptors. It is the rods and cones first. Optic nerve contains only the nerve fiber layers, but no rods and cones. So wherever the optic nerve is present, that area will be seen as a blind spot. So this is the blind spot, and this is the fovea. So this is the disc, and this is the fovea of the left eye. So here you can see this much area we will be able to see. The superior part or the temporal part, and this is the nasal part. This is the inferior part. This is our field of vision. We have an instrument for recording the field of vision that is called as perimetry. So this is the instrument which is being used. The patient keeps his forehead here, and you can record the field of vision of this particular patient. So this method of testing the visual field is called as perimetry. This is a procedure of choice for glaucomatous field. The fovea is the center point where you'll have the maximum vision, and wherever the optic disc is present, that area will be shown as a blind spot. Now, the arrangement of the nerve fibers within the layers of the retina are important for us to understand the field effects. So, firstly, whatever nasal fibers are there, that is the nasal fibers from your retina, the nasal half of the retina, those fibers will enter the disc directly as superior and inferior radiating fibers, whereas few macular fibers will enter the disc horizontally as a papillomacular bundle. Whereas the temporal retina, the temporal fibers that is from the temporal part of the retina will take a curve over the papillomacular bundles as arcuate fibers. That is the superior and inferior arcuate fibers. I'll show you here. Now this is the disc and this area is the macula. So if this is the disc and this is the macula, this part becomes temporal and this part becomes the nasal. So the nasal fibers will come directly and get inserted into this part of the disc in this shape. This is called as the radiating fibers. These are the superior radiating fibers here in red and yellow. What you're seeing are the superior radiating fibers. Here in yellow and red are seen are the inferior radiating fibers. Now this part is the macula. So whatever fibers are there from the macula will go straight as a horizontal elongation. So this area is called as papillomacular bundle. This area will be preserved even in the last stages of glaucoma. So the patient will have some temporal island of vision and some central vision in the late stages of glaucoma. Whereas the fibers which are present in the temporal half of the retina will take a curve over the papillomacular bundle. So these will form an arc-like picture in case of temporal part of the retina. That's why these are called as superior. The red region, yellow region here, red region here are called as superior arcuating fibers. And these three regions here down are called as inferior arcuating fibers. Why this arrangement is important is to understand the visual field effects and the nerve fiber layer defects. Now, how to read what is a normal visual field? As we have seen, fovea is the fixation point through which you can fix steadily, and blind spot is the area where the optic disc is placed. Why we have this area as blind spot? I told you, because the optic nerve does not contain any photoreceptors. Rods and cones are absent in the area of blind spot. So that appears as a dark area in the normal visual field. This is how our vision will be. So the entire area will be able to see, and one particular area is a blind spot, and fovea is the best point or the fixation point. In case of glaucoma, slowly progressive visual field defects are seen. We'll see this visual field defects step by step. First, what will happen is, normally this area is entirely, the area above the blind spot is also included in our field. But slowly in case of a glaucomatous patient, there will be bearing of the blind spot. So the area above the blind spot or around the blind spot will also not be visible. So his visual field will become contracted, or there will be a contraction of the visual field, only it becomes this much. Rather than being a total area above the blind spot, there will be bearing of the blind spot and the area above it will not be visible. So there is a contraction. This is called as isopter contraction and bearing of the blind spot. Next changes are, you are seeing a small scotoma can occur above or below. So this is paracentral. This is the central area of our field. So paracentrally, you will see a scotoma. It can be superiorly or inferiorly also. This is your blind spot. This is not going to change. This will be present even in a normal person. So the scotoma will be seen in the paracentral area. Next, what happens is this blind area gets connected in the shape of a sickle. This is called as sedal scotoma. In the paracentral scotoma and the blind spot, they're getting connected. You call it as sedal scotoma. These are all the changes which happen in a case of glaucoma. The visual field changes will come step by step. So what we have seen first is, this is our normal field. Then you have seen that there is a isopter contraction with bearing of the blind spot. Then you see there will be a paracentral scotoma occurring, that is above, or it can happen even inferior. Next step will be the joining of the paracentral scotoma and the blind spot, seen as sedal scotoma. Next is, this scotoma keeps on increasing in size here, but this will not involve the macular area. So it goes above the macular area in the shape of an arc, because the nerve fiber layers are arranged in the shape of an arc here. That's why you call it as arcuate scotoma, or germ scotoma is another name. So all these scotomas, the blind spot, Paracentral scotoma, when joining together, form the cedial scotoma. When the progressive neuropathy takes place, it goes on till this area. Mind you, it never crosses the midline because the superior fibers are differently inserted into the optic disc, and the inferior fibers are differently inserted into the optic disc. So this will not cross like this. The field changes which are taking place in the inferior part of the disc will come here, but these will follow a horizontal meridian. It will not cross the horizontal meridian and will take the shape of an arcuate scotoma. So when the lower part of the visual field or the disc is involved, so the nerve fiber layers of this area also being damaged, they will also form an arcuate scotoma. So then you call it as double arcuate or a ring-shaped scotoma. This is a superior scotoma, this is the inferior scotoma, and this is called as double arcuate scotoma. And you have a small step here. They are not actually inclined exactly toward above each other. So there is an area of step that is called as Rouenè's nasal step. In the end, when the entire visual field is involved, there are two areas that are not involved. One is the temporal area. So the patient will have a temporal area of vision, and another one is a central area of vision. So the patient will have a temporal island of vision and central island of vision. So these are the things, that is what is called as tubular vision. The patient is able to see tubularly. He will not be able to see what is happening besides him on either side or above and below. So this is the end stage of glaucoma, which will show you a tubular vision because of the macular fibers. That is, the temporal and central islands are left. So now we have the perimetry. The perimetry is a method. In that we have different instruments. Humphrey Visual Field Analyzer is one such instrument which will show you, this is a perimetry only, this will show you how are the visual field defects seen. Now, we have seen all the visual field defects. Just in brief, I'll show you again. This is because of the representation of the nerve fiber layers within the optic disc and their arrangement around the optic disc. So these are the nasal fibers going straight. These are the radiating fibers, superior and inferior. And you have the straight ones are the papillomacular bundle, and the arc-shaped are superior and inferior arcuate fibers. Because of this, these are the visual field changes, starting with bearing of blind spot, paracentral scotoma, cedial scotoma, germ scotoma or arcuate scotoma, and this is a double arcuate scotoma. In the end, the patient will have a central island of vision and a temporal island of vision. So this is the instrument, visual field analyzer, used to detect the visual field defects. Now, investigations. Primary open angle glaucoma investigations. First thing is slit lamp examination. What do you see in the slit lamp examination of anterior segment? Mostly the anterior segment is normal until there is a lot of damage to the optic nerve causing RAPD. That is, pupillary reflex is affected. When the pupillary reflex is affected, then only you can see a change in the anterior segment. Second investigation is your tonometry. Tonometry will record the intraocular pressure. This gives you an idea. If the intraocular pressure is more than 21, then there is a probability of the patient having glaucoma. Then you have to go and check how are the angles. The method of checking the angle is called as gonioscopy. We have seen the gonioscopy has got 4 mirrors. So through each of the mirror, you see the superior part of superior mirror will show you the, actually there is a reversal of the mirrors. The superior mirror will show you the inferior part of the angle. The inferior mirror will show you the superior part of the angle. The same way, the nasal mirror will show you the temporal part of the angle, and the temporal mirror will show you the nasal part of the angle. So that is done by gonioscopy. Next is your disc evaluation. How do you evaluate the disc? The disc evaluation is done by slit lamp biomicroscopy. That is, you use an instrument called as a lens. That is, 90 diopter lens is used to evaluate the optic disc on clinical examination. So that is your disc evaluation. That is also very important. Not only the nerve fiber layer evaluation by the visual fields, but your disc and nerve fiber layer evaluation by your clinical examination should also be recorded. This will show you the progressive changes. Sometimes even before the disc changes are seen, you can see the visual field changes. These are the nerve fiber changes and the visual field changes can be picked up early, but your disc evaluation is absolutely important. Whenever you're recording the disc changes, you have to draw the disc and the nerve fiber layer damages and represent them so that you can compare it with the previous report of the patient. Or when the patient comes to you for a follow-up, you should be able to assess if the damage is progressing. It is a progressive optic neuropathy, but when you start the patient on treatment, there shouldn't be any progression, isn't it? So that progression can be stopped or can be checked when you know whether your treatment is effective or not. If at all your treatment is not effective, you can increase one more drug. So therapy part will deal with it tomorrow. So just for your revision sake, this is the position of gonioscopy. This is showing one angle. The closed angle looks like this, and an open angle will show you all the angle structures starting from Schwalbe's line. This is a thin line. Trabecular meshwork is the pigmented part. Scleral spur is white. Sclera is white in color. So you see a white area. And again, ciliary body band is a pigmented area. So these are the structures in gonioscopy. This is your instrument. So as I said, 4 mirrors are there. The superior mirror will show you the inferior part of the angle. Inferior mirror will show you the superior part of the angle. This instrument is your tonometry. This is applanation tonometer. This is the investigation, very important. So thank you for today. We'll end here. In the next class, we will deal with the treatment, the medical and the surgical aspects of open angle glaucoma. So just for your revision sake, primary open, the classification of glaucoma goes as congenital or acquired. Congenital glaucoma might be starting at an early age as congenital glaucoma, or at a later stage as developmental glaucoma. Again, your primary glaucomas can be with an open angle or with a closed angle, or the patient might have secondary glaucomas. That we will deal with differently in a different class. So today we'll end the class here. Tomorrow the therapy of or the treatment of glaucoma can be continued.